Ladies and gentlemen, dear fleet colleagues, welcome to this first ever webinar of the IFMI. My name is Steven Schroefs, I'm the Chief Editor of Fleet Europe, and we are really happy that you can all join this first ever IFMI webinar on alternative powertrains in your car fleet. The IFMI stands for International Fleet Managers Institute. As you perhaps know, it is the dedicated training and expertise sharing platform for international fleet managers. Next to that, the IFMI also stimulates forward action and triggers innovative thinking. Last but not least, the IFMI focuses on best practice sharing and interaction. You will have the opportunity today, at the end of this first ever webinar of the IFMI, to ask your questions to our experts. But first, perhaps a little explanation on the topic of today. And that topic, ladies and gentlemen, is alternative powertrains in your car fleet. The IFMI partners believe it is high time to address this topic in our fleet community, as we see that different elements, different drivers are encouraging thinking about this topic. First of all, there is of course the permanent technological development of powertrains. Almost every OEM car manufacturer invests in new powertrain technologies and looks how to make these powertrain technologies cost efficient and where possible driver friendly. A second element is related to the way our community in general is putting more and more importance to environmental aspects. This related to the economy, our welfare and the future of our society. Thirdly, we see that countries and cities in particular are searching to better streamline the mobility of their citizens. With this, the use and integration of alternative powertrains can't be denied, although that in terms of infrastructure there is still a big and a long way in front of us. And finally, our governments are orienting the legislative and tax policies more and more around our environmental characteristics, certainly when talking about transport and company cars. So all these elements make that a webinar on alternative powertrains has its place in today's car fleet management. But it's not me who will today be the expert. The experts that are going to take you on the path of the integration of alternative powertrains in your car fleet are Denis Ferraud of Arval, and he will explain where we are already today with alternative powertrain vehicles, and also a little bit about the strategy that can sit behind the policy of alternative powertrains that you would like to develop in your fleet management. After that, we have a case study. Hans den Hollander of Cisco, he will shine a light on the way that his company is trying to implement new powertrain vehicles in the car fleet. So, ladies and gentlemen, may I now give the floor of this webinar to the first speaker, the expert speaker, Denis Ferraud. And Denis, he is head of consulting at Arval. Denis, the webinar floors is yours.
Thank you very much, Steven. As you rightly said, this is time to unveil and to see the evolution of those new energy and those new powertrains, and to see the different technologies that are available today and tomorrow. And then we will see the constraint and the reason why it's high time to have them developed. And as a conclusion, we'll see how they can properly fit into a company strategy. So first, I would like to share with you a common agreed view, which is on the next slide, on the existing and future technology. We all recognize that today full hybrids, so vehicles that are powered by both an electric and an internal combustion engine, are proven technology. They work, they are in the streets. They shortly will be strengthened by plug-in hybrid, which means not only the fuel of the car is able to reload the battery of the electric vehicle, but also the external networks of electricity providers. So this is proven technology, this is already working, and business case has been demonstrated to see the real value of those technology. Electric vehicle has been on the marketplace for a long time, and we still are looking for mass market for a more wider usage of those vehicles, especially with new technology that will allow to have much more energy available into the car and then to extend the range of those vehicles. So definitely the technology breakthrough, and especially on energy storage in one hand and infrastructure on the other hand, will turn this vehicle from niche to mass market. And we also see hydrogen fuel cell vehicle, so electric vehicle powered by the reaction of a chemical reaction produced by hydrogen that creates energy. We see that those vehicles will also be an option in our fleet, probably not before 2020, but still we see the first prototype running in the street today. So the reason to select those vehicles is not necessarily the technology, but the usage, because technologies are here. So if we want to see the quick evolution of those technologies or the registration, we can see, and this example is in the UK, the very quick and very inflating progress of registration. Blue is hybrid, red is electric, but there is definitely a volume effect that is putting those technology more present in our fleet. But if we look on the right-hand corner at the country-specific registration, we will see that actually the penetration, the market share, definitely depends on country. By example, if we take Netherlands, 13% of the registration are on hybrid vehicle, we will recognize that tax has a very strong effect in registering those vehicles. In Denmark, absolutely no hybrid vehicle, reason being also taxes and import taxes on those vehicles. So the offer is here, the supply is proven, but the market acceptance depends not only on the technology, but also on the economical and tax case study. So the key challenge those vehicles are facing are, of course, environmental. The pressure on lowering the target of CO2 emission by the authority is very strong, and the target of 2020 reducing by 95 down to 95 grams per kilometer the CO2 emission of the car running in Europe is a very strong incentive. So as a result, the creativity of the OEM is very high to offer to our fleet alternative to the existing emission of the engine of today. But there is also strong pressure to reduce other pollutants, and especially Euro 6 norms that we will start seeing in September 2014 and officially in September 2015 will also put strong pressure on the technology that the engine will use in the very next future. So as I said, what influences the choice is also, of course, very economical, and TCO, as we will see in the next slide, is the main component to decide which powertrain, which energy should be selected in the company. Before we go into this TCO, another aspect is also the acceptance by the employee of those vehicles, especially in terms of range, in terms of usability, in terms of comfort in using those vehicles. By using, we mean running and also filling the vehicle. So having a quick look on the TCO, we can see that on the funding part of the TCO, definitely the uncertainty of the future market value of electric vehicle still put high residual value, which means, a low residual value, which means an expected forecast of the future value of those vehicles within 3 to 5 years. Whereas for hybrid vehicle, a more massive offer creates residual value that is easier to foresee. In terms of maintenance, tire insurance, standard product and services, we don't see, or we see a very limited impact, so they really are seen as fleet managers as the other vehicle. Maybe less maintenance on electric vehicle, especially for the engine part. The main difference is definitely on fuel spent, especially for electric vehicle, for obvious reason, or energy spent, I should say, with a strong benefit in the calculation of electricity powered and access to electricity. And also, of course, taxes are the main influencer of the choice of those vehicles, and it's very hard for global fleet managers, as you are all today around this webinar, to consider Europe as a single country as far as tax are concerned. There is as many creativity in taxes, especially incentive or disadvantage of those new vehicles, than there is countries. And if we go on the total cost of running the fleet, of course the infrastructure, the charging spot, the cost to access the energy need also to be vague in this equation. So in a nutshell, which the next slide will tell us, the main reason or the main strategy you should address before selecting one or the other powertrain is definitely a mix between those 4 key strategies. Of course, cost reduction is a main driver, but cost reduction at least should be seen in using the TCO, at least to challenge existing cost of conventional energy with future energy. And as we said, the main offsetters of TCO are probably taxes and cost of fuel. Of course, in your strategy, your corporate social responsibility, your willingness to demonstrate efforts in terms of CO2 and pollution reduction should be very strong, but we also recognize that it's not at any cost. Third point to consider is definitely your driver satisfaction, the way to manage and to motivate drivers. Of course, vehicles are a key incentiver for this. Functionality of the vehicle should at least match the minimum requirement that a driver should expect from his vehicle. And for electric vehicle, by example, we see that in some cases, drivers are highly motivated to run electric vehicle because their pattern, their profile of use is very close to what the vehicle offers. And of course, in other hand, some cannot even see electric vehicle as a future option. So considering HR performance is key in that matter. And of course, making sure that the vehicle, so again, vehicle network range covers all the need of the company. So a combination of the 4 strategy and setting clear objective on the 4 topics should definitely be the way to assess the future usage of powertrain in your fleet.
So Denis, thank you very much for this very comprehensive analysis. So to all the participants, if you have questions for Denis or for the other IFMI partners and experts that we will present at the end of this webinar, then you can use the chat function in this webinars so that the questions that you have can be answered during our Q&A session at the end of the webinar. Our second expert speaker today is Mr. Hans den Hollander. Mr. Hans den Hollander of Cisco. And Hans will explain what has been done already and what will be done at Cisco in terms of alternative powertrain vehicles, the integration of those vehicles in his fleet, and what is to know in terms of fleet management, the do's and the don'ts. So please welcome Hans den Hollander of Cisco. Hans, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Steven, and good afternoon, everybody. And it's an honor to explain a little bit about our EV program in Cisco. Just a little bit referring to the last slide of Denis. I think our strategy is definitely a mix between those items he mentioned, so cost and corporate social responsibility and also HR performance. But let's start at the beginning, which is 2012. We were invited by BMW in a number of countries to use their test vehicles, battery electric vehicles in our company for a year or a little bit longer to see how that works and with driving and charging and range anxiety and everything. So we use those cars in the Netherlands, in France, and in the UK. 2 cars in the UK for a little bit over 1 year. And so we gained quite some experience with those cars as pool cars. The next. So also in 2012, we started with a pilot in the Netherlands. We didn't have anything covered in the car policy yet, but there was quite a strong demand from our employees, and this was really tax-driven because at that time the benefit in kind for use of company cars was very low or zero with regards to cars emitting less than 50 grams CO2, and that includes the plug-in hybrids, like for instance the Opel Ampera or the plug-in Prius. So we said, okay, let's just get started with a couple of those vehicles to be on offer for the employees. We also had battery electric vehicles like the Nissan Leaf or the Renault Fluence, but people chose mainly the plug-in hybrids. So at that time, 2012, we had a total of 15 cars in our fleet. A year later, we have introduced the EV into our car policy, which covers the EMER, well, Europe and emerging markets area. And we continue to see a lot of orders intake for especially for the Netherlands at that time. So in total, 35 more plug-in hybrids in the Netherlands. Next one, Stephen. If we look at where we are today, like I said, we have about 50. Well, as we speak, it's already more because of those 10 cars. A couple of them have already been delivered. In the Netherlands, we have at the moment 10 charging points at the office. And still we continue to see more order intake for plug-in hybrids. And also we look at other models right now that are appear to be coming in. We have 1 EV delivered in Austria. There's 1 in the UK, 1 in France, and we see more interest coming from, well, Norway especially, but also in Denmark. And also in the UK, we can see interest is growing because the tax over there is becoming more beneficial for electric vehicles. There's a £5,000 tax grant, car grant for low-emitting electric cars. And also the choice is growing, of course. So there's really a lot of new cars coming on the market, like the BMW i3 or the Tesla Model S for the higher ranges, the Volvo and the Mitsubishi plug-ins. Well, we get the e-Golf this year. We get the Audi A3 e-tron this year. So there's really a lot coming on the market pretty soon or already available. So how do we organize this in our fleet and in our policy? We share the cost as follows. Cisco pays, we have the car budgets for employees who are car eligible. So the car needs to be covered within that budget, but it has to include a home charger. So there has to be some budget left for the home charger. Cisco also organize the charging points at offices. We have a global workplace resources policy to arrange for charging points. The number of charging points is 1 for each 4 electric vehicles that we have in our fleet, or that people have privately, which they use to commute to the office. And we cover the cost of the electricity, and in the case of the hybrid cars, we also, of course, cover the fuel cost. What do we ask from employees? They have to pay, in case they move house from one to another, they have to pay for the home charging point to be removed and reinstalled in their new place. And also, if they leave Cisco on their own request, we charge them the cost to remove the charger from their home. So the criteria, when can people order an electric vehicle? Well, of course, their lease budget needs to allow for the vehicle, including that home charger, as I already mentioned. We don't allow it for people who really have a very high mileage, so we set a limit on 30,000 kilometers per year. And also we ask them to look at the, let's say, the way they drive. The commuting distance should not be too long, but also regular customers that they need to visit shouldn't be on the other side of the country, things like that. And also they need to have a place at home where we can install that charger. And furthermore, we don't have any, let's say, financial force to say, okay, well, this is what you need to do, but we really strongly appeal on the employees to make all efforts to drive as much as possible in the electric mode. So that's what we really encourage. A little bit about the process. So if somebody is interested in a car, they LeasePlan, our supplier in most European countries, will arrange for the home charger to be installed in their place. The price of that charger has to be included in the leasing budget, so there's no upfront payment, anything done by us. It's only between us and the leasing company. They are also the point of contact for any driver queries. They have set up an EV desk, where drivers can go to and can get all their questions answered and get all their problems solved. For example, lately there was somebody who couldn't get their their socket removed from the charging point anymore, so then somebody needs to come to provide assistance. We say after the lease period, typically 4 years, the ownership of the home charger is transferred to the employee. We have fuel and charging cards. This is in the Netherlands, but I think we can also use that in the future in other countries, where with one card people can use to take fuel, to activate the home charger, the public charger, and also the chargers at the office. So it's very user-friendly. A little bit about the office charging. I said we have 4 cars per each one charger, and that really takes a lot of good cooperation between the employees, and this is really working quite well. We have an email group where people can say, okay, I need a charger after lunch, and other people will remove their car during that time when their car is fully charged. So we can really see a very good cooperation between the employees to optimize the use of the office chargers. We receive reports from LeasePlan with regards to the electricity and fuel consumption of the cars. A little bit later I can show you the example of a report that we see there. If we look at the results so far, so with these 60 cars that are actually on the road right now, we are avoiding 120 tons of carbon emission each year. Due to the savings on fuel and the lower price of electricity, we also save on fuel actually. So even fuel minus the spent on electricity, we save yearly an amount of 65k euros. And in, well, especially in the Netherlands, but also in other countries, we can see that there's an incentive also for employees to choose such a vehicle due to a low tax on low emitting vehicles. Yeah, and then to wrap up a little bit, tips and tricks. You have to make sure that the right people get an EV. So there are people who really don't fit in one because of their the way the yearly mileage or their commuting distance, etc. Well, they shouldn't be in such a car. And it's not just about tax savings. We really want to achieve something here with regards to the emissions. When we share the fuel consumption results, like in the graph that we see there on the right-hand side, we really stimulate people to improve their fuel economy if they see that this is being reported, and they can see, compare their result with their colleagues. They can see, okay, we need to do a little bit better to do this. You can see the top three here. They are really quite good with average consumption of 1 liter of petrol per 100 kilometers. And like I already mentioned, we have an email group to optimize the usage of the office chargers. And I think looking to the future, we are ready for it with regards to our policy and also with regards to the cooperation with LeasePlan. It's not in all countries that we can provide vehicles yet, but we can see it's really growing, and more countries are well, enabling the ordering of electric vehicles. And well, for us, it's really encouraging that we see this result so far, and we really look forward to increase the size of this electric fleet. Stephen.
Okay, thank you, Hans. Thank you very much for your expertise. I'm sure that our participants have learned a lot, but that they will also have some questions. So now we will begin with the final chapter of this first IFMI webinar. So if you have questions for our experts, then please, you can send them by using the chat function of the webinar tool. It would make it a little bit easier if you can also tell us to whom your question will be addressed, so that we ask it to the right person. For our experts, may I ask them all to be quiet when someone is answering the questions, so that we avoid that 3 or 4 people are answering the questions at the same time. You see now on your slide all the experts, but not all of them are here in the webinar room. We have in the webinar room, we have Christophe Duprat of ALD, we have Denis Ferraud, of course, of Arval, we have Nathalie de Vries of LeasePlan, and then of course we have Hans den Hollander of Cisco. So we will start now with this little Q&A. If there are any questions that we, due to the timing, we can't answer in this Q&A, we will of course come back on your questions later in our Fleet Europe magazine, and also on our dedicated IFMI website. So I will now start with the Q&A. So Hans, there are a few questions for you. The first one, Hans, is how did Cisco go about selecting the right drivers of EVs? Did you solicit users or did drivers request to be the driver of an EV?
Well, when we started with a pilot, we informed the driver desk of our leasing company, Elise, that they should actively promote the use or the choice of electric vehicles to the drivers, and we also asked them to make sure that indeed the people with the right criteria with regards to their driving pattern were able to order a vehicle. So, but yeah, the word goes around, and people hear from their colleagues that it's possible. So very quickly we had a large pool of people who were very interested to order one. Mm-hmm. So we didn't really have to do a lot of effort from our side to motivate people. Maybe in other countries outside of the Netherlands, where it's now slowly growing, there will be we need to do a little bit more, but. Yeah, so far it went by itself.
Okay, thank you. Another question that we have, but that's for the IFMI partners, and I want to start with Christophe Duprat. Christophe, we have seen in the presentation that the integration of alternative powertrains and the sales is of those type of vehicles is increasing, but it's still quite low. From your experience, do you think that it's already the right moment to integrate really alternative powertrain vehicles like EVs and other type of vehicles in corporate car fleets?
Yes, thank you, Stephen. I think it is the right moment to start this integration. However, it may be too early to industrialize this integration, meaning that to us, it is too early to have those new powertrains in the car policy. However, listening positively to specific demands from drivers willing to go for a hybrid, for a plug-in, or even for an EV, it should be considered positively and try to sort out a solution, making it possible right now, so that by leveraging on this differentiation, it should it should start a virtuous trend within the company.
Okay, thank you very much for your answer. A question for Denis Ferraud. Denis, there is a question on the fact that when you will introduce alternative powertrain vehicles, that you, let's say, have to learn your drivers and your corporate employees a little bit more about how to use those type of vehicles. So we will come to a sort of a change management that is needed. Can you give some important tips perhaps for the fleet managers, what they have to think about when they want to address the integration of alternative powertrains with their drivers in terms of change management?
Yes, you're absolutely right. The impact of the driver is probably much more important in those vehicles than on conventional, on classical vehicle. Let me give you an example. We had some customer where hybrids was a very interesting option, especially on the paper for economical reason. And after a few months, they discovered that the results were not exactly at the level of expectation they had when they planned the implementation of those hybrids vehicle. The main reason was the way the vehicle were driven. Not only the driving style, we all know that from the expected results, when we look at the fuel consumption, there's probably 20 to 30% difference between the theoretical and the real fuel consumption. So it was not the driver behavior in terms of misbehaving that was in cause, it was the driver location in terms of appropriate behaving or appropriate place to drive the car. So yes, an hybrid in a city center with short distance using intensively the electric part of the vehicle is a very good option, and hybrid on long distance with especially petrol usage when you cannot deduct the tax benefit from petrol cannot necessarily match the expected result. So first, the learning curve should include a phase where expected and real figures should match. This is probably more on the side of the fleet manager. Second is understanding where the vehicle will be driven and how the vehicle will be driven. And third, of course, is train the driver so that they make the most of the technology, which is a very smart and a very practical way of driving. So they have also to change their mindset. And if we combine the three, appropriate selection of the vehicle for economical, CSR, and operational reason. Second, the right vehicle at the right place. And third, having a better behavior of the driver, it's definitely a key success.
Thank you very much, Denis. Thank you very much. We have another question for Hans den Hollander. Hans, a question here, quite a concrete question. There's a question on the home chargers. Can you a little bit explain why you have chosen to install those home chargers with the employees, and what exactly are those home chargers? What do you need them for? Are these rapid charging points? What is the reason behind it? Hans?
There was a mute on my side.
Okay.
No, we use them for, first of all, because of safety reason, because, well, you know that usually the plug-in hybrid, you have also a regular socket that you can put in the wall socket, plug you put in the wall socket, sorry. But yeah, we have to be sure that the safety is guaranteed, so that's why we have the chargers. Well, they have a higher amperage, so they are quicker than normally in any household you can charge, but they're also safer, of course. So that's the reason why we ask people to install it. The fact that we do install them there, besides the ones that we already have in the office, is the fact that the cars have all the time at night to be charged when they're standing there in front of the house or in the garage. So it's a very good opportunity to every day make sure the car gets fully charged.
Thank you. Another question for you, Hans, is a question on, let's say, the savings. So you explained a little bit that the savings that you can do are in terms of fuel, but how did you examine, or what are your results or opinions in terms of potential extra costs, for example, for the higher investments of the cars, perhaps a lower residual value? How did you deal with that?
Yeah, well, I think that's that's an issue for our leasing company. Mm-hmm. They, of course, have to deal with the residual value and have to take a good, well, standpoint with regards to the risk they take there. Fact is that we can choose a number of electric cars or plug-in hybrid cars within the budget of our employees. Well, in this case, it's a good thing that our car policy budgets are excluding fuel, meaning that with that same budget, if people choose an electric car, we can see direct savings for Cisco, because we don't spend that on fuel, which would otherwise be also paid to the employee if it was within the budget. So that's really a direct result that we can see. The more of those electric cars we introduce in the fleet, the more we can save on fuel.
Okay. Like you mentioned, it's perhaps also interesting to have a lease partner of a lease company reflecting on this question. So I will now go to Nathalie de Vries. Nathalie, what is your opinion about eventually the cost of the vehicle compared to the fuel saving that you can have and the residual value issue? Do you already, for example, see that the residual value is becoming closer and closer to that of, let's say, the traditional combustion engine cars?
Yeah, first to reflect on the residual value. That is mostly a matter of demand and supply. We have seen in the past that, for instance, the hybrid cars at the very beginning were a bit low on the RV because the leasing companies did not have a clear view on how that would develop. But over time, the demand was there, the sales into the second-hand market picked up. So for that type of technology, we see quite normal residual values. For full electric, we see it's the same type of curve. In the beginning, a bit conservative, just to see, okay, what's happening. We also have to factor in that on full electric cars with the technology and the improvements on the battery, that we stay in sync with yeah, the demand in the second-hand market. But we see that over time, as the technology develops and the demand is picking up, RVs are getting to a similar level of the traditional combustion engines. On the topic of fuel saving, it's really important that you pick the right audience for people driving alternative powertrains. I mean, we see examples where drivers purely from a tax reason select a alternative powertrain because the benefit in kind taxation is lower. But if they use it, well, let's call it incorrectly, hence driving long distance on highways and with not the full electric, but making use of more the combustion engine rather than the electric powertrain, that we see a rather high deviation on fuel cost, because the hybrids are meant also for shorter distance and in city traffic, so making more use of the electric powertrain. So if there is a mismatch in usage compared to how the car was meant to be used, we see a large deviation on fuel. But if it's used in the correct way, you can definitely save on fuel.
Okay, thank you very much, Nathalie. Another question for our case study speaker, Hans den Hollander. Hans, we all know that electricity is perhaps environmentally friendly, but is not fully emission-free if you, let's say, use it like like that, without, let's say, really deep thought. So the question here is more on how have you, or are you willing to look at the fact that your employees use electricity produced from renewable sources, so environmentally friendly sources?
Yeah. So in our policies, as much as possible, we use green electricity, so that's covered for a large part. I think in the home chargers that's not often not the case. I think most important here is, because we all know that it's indeed it's not zero, but really important is that we get this this phenomenon started, and we get the cars on the road, and the next step then should be that we should have more electricity from green sources like solar power or wind power, etc. Yeah, I think it's, when you look at the Netherlands, you can see there are so many charging points already and so many hybrid cars, plug-in hybrid cars on the road. I think it's really good that the infrastructure is now rapidly building up, and I think it's interesting for the future that we have that ready, and we can really make that a success story also from a renewable energy point of view.
Okay, Hans, another question for you. Did Cisco had to adapt the budgets to match with EV TCO? did you have to, let's say, do the exercise on the budgets that you allocate again in order to match, yes, the cost and the TCO of the electric vehicles?
No, we did not increase the budgets. We saw sometimes that, well, if it's all new, so sometimes we saw that the estimation of the residual value was in some countries a little bit bad, a little bit low. So we discussed the matter and we tried to get some other calculations from our supplier to get budgets fitted within the job grades. So we haven't increased it, and we can see now, as Natalie said, it's becoming more familiar with this type of vehicles, that prices are a little bit going down, sometimes with the help of government assistance, and sometimes just on its own.
Okay. Time for two more questions. Here is one still for Hans den Hollander. Hans, if you had to do things over again in your process integrating alternative powertrains, what would you do differently and why?
Well, I think one thing that we could have done perhaps a little bit quicker or better is to get the charger installed in the offices, because we didn't, well, the speed of ordering of the vehicles was so quick that we didn't, in the beginning, didn't have enough of those chargers installed. So it was a little bit busy in the beginning to get all the cars charged. So that's definitely something we would have looked at if we would do it all over again. Yeah, I think that's really the main item. Another thing maybe it's good to mention, although we didn't have that a lot yet, is that if somebody leaves our company and the car needs to be reallocated to somebody else, you need to be very careful to find again a right candidate for the use of that vehicle. So I think that speaks for itself.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Hans, thank you very much for your answers. The last question of this Q&A session is on a slide that was shown a little bit before, and I'm going to try to take it back. And it's perhaps the first one to answer is Denis Ferraud, as it was in his presentation, I think. Denis, the question, and perhaps it's good to illustrate it with the slide that you see now in front of you. The question is, in fact, you have well explained a little bit more the roadmap for different type of alternative powertrains. Can you tell us perhaps also a little bit more, what about CNG? Do you have any information on that, or how do you see that? What is happening with your clients? So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, CNG, excuse me, CNG was technology that was running perfectly well probably 15 years ago. We saw, especially in the bus and in the truck industry, robust solution based on CNG. In terms of individual vehicle, there was, or there still is, two issues. One is on the storage of the gas. The shape of the CNG bottle, if I may say so, was a constraint on the vehicle, and 300 bars is a high pressure. So storage in the car was not very easy to manage, but OEM always find solution to counter this type of technological complexity. The second was especially on the network to reload, refuel the vehicle, which is a network owned and operated by gas professional and not necessarily by fuel professional. So we may see the same issue on the hydrogen vehicle, with a few exceptions, is that the hydrogen load can be mixed with the petrol station, which means you can have a mix and hybrid, if I may say so, hybrid station where you can either refuel in classical petrol or diesel energy or also in hydrogen. They can be combined in the same location. So in terms of investment, in terms of networks, you can see economy of scales in that matter. But for the CNG, and especially in a country that had no structured network of distribution, that was a key issue. Italy was able to solve this issue, and we see a lot of CNG vehicle and also LPG, but especially CNG vehicle running in Italy because of micro distribution station. So for those who want CNG is compressed natural gas for vehicle, which is methane, whereas LPG is liquid petroleum gas, which is propane and different pressure to use the two gas. So almost natural pressure for LPG and 200 bars, 200 pascals for CNG.
Okay, thank you very much, Denis. We are now at the end of this webinar. I would like to thank everyone for the participation. I will go to the last slide because there is some information and I have some practical information for all the participants. So the recorded version of this webinar will be online in a few days at our dedicated website, ifmi.fleeteurope.com, so that you can, if you want to see it again or share some parts of the webinar with some colleagues, then you can do that. Of course, this webinar is only for car fleet managers, so we will make sure that only car fleet clients have access also to the webinar. And then last but not least, after the webinar, we will send you a little thank you email with also a satisfaction survey in order to help us to improve our future webinars with the IFMI. So it would be great if you could fill it in and send it back so that we can see what your thoughts are about this first initiative for the IFMI. I want to thank all experts, also all the IFMI partners, and I hope to meet and see you soon and at the next event of the IFMI. Thank you very much.